gonna then, perfect. So I'm just gonna do a little rundown of the course overall. So like I mentioned before, the course is an open source podcasting course. So it's aimed at creating podcasts or narrative audio mediums that doesn't have to be like the traditional format of podcasting or anything, using open source material. Oops, some people just popped in. So we're going to be using Reaper, which is a free software. And we've also going to be using Zencastr, which is a free web platform that we've used for recording interviews. So it's a free account. There's a premium version, but we'll go over it and I'll run us through the full kind of usage of it. So me and Eugene, for this specifically, have designed kind of narrative arch as well. We've selected some interviewees. So we've conducted, I think, 4 at the moment, and we'll do the last one today, of different people in Ukraine helping in different ways. So we've kind of tied into the main, the humanitarian efforts in Ukraine specifically. And we'll have a little look at how to dissect the interviews, how to look at how they can interrelate. And we're going to be kind of developing it together, because at the moment we have simply recorded the stock, the questioning, and we have the full interviews, but through these 8 workshops, we're going to slowly go and work through them together, so you can kind of see like the in-depth process. And if you have Reaper installed, the link here is in the chat. You're welcome to download the files and copy along just to get used to it, or do them in your own time later if you want as well. Other than that, I'm just having a quick look at my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. Yeah, other than that, I think we're probably good. I'm going to maybe share my screen now, and we'll start just talking about the Zencastr, which is the first part of this. So the interviews, I'll show you a little bit of it. 1 second.
Journey of independent podcasting. That's the first step to it.
2 minutes. So I think, can you guys see my screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'll just go straight from, I'm going to treat everything from step 1, assuming no one has seen any software of anything before. So just through Google, you can find Zencastr. And in here, I will have already made an account, and I should be, I'm not logged in, but it'll log me in now. So yeah, again, free to make an account. And essentially, it's kind of like a Zoom platform, but it records from the person's own hard disk. So with Zoom, for example, when you have a call, if the connection goes a bit funny, if you're recording that, you're going to have that connection interference, or when the call drops, etc. But what Zencastr does is it records the audio from the person's own computer, so it's not reliant on the internet, essentially. So as you can see here, I've got a few episodes. These are actually the people you're going to be seeing already, but you can just create a new episode, and from here we'll call this test 1. You have a little drop-down menu for languages. We'll just select English for now, just so it's there. And then you have these 3 options. So you can either record simply audio and just have it as an audio call, like a sort of phone call. You can record the audio and show the video, so that you could still have the one-to-one interaction of a video call, but equally you just take the audio so you don't have huge file sizes. Or you can record the audio and record the video, which for the podcasting course is maybe not as relevant, but maybe for yourself, if you're looking at doing like a video-based thing or just having them to save, it's a useful option. But I would, for all of these ones, I've just done record audio and show video. So you still have the personalization, and you can kind of have a bit more of a meaningful connection with the person you're interviewing. But again, it's not got plenty of file size. So yeah, as you can see here, my face shows up. And essentially what you just do is you send out a link. Now it can be a little bit temperamental. When me and Eugene have been doing this, there have been times when, depending on what software, what browser the person is using, it's not let them in or given a little bit of problems. But as long as you allocate maybe 5-10 minutes of time just to make sure it's happy beforehand, you can just send out a link. So as you can see, there's this invite button, and from here you can either put their email address or just send a code, and the person just clicks that and appears in here. And then once everyone's in and you're good to start, you can just hit start recording. And then if I back out a little bit here, I'll just show you a previous example. So today we're going to be looking at Victor anyway. So I'll show you what Victor's podcasting environment looks like. So as you can see, we had 3 people on the call, me, Eugene, and Victor. And there's these 3 MP3 buttons there. So because we have we're using the free version, the MP3 buttons are there to download the file, and that's the file format. So I don't know how familiar you guys are, but you have different file formats: MP3, .wav, .flac, etc. The main one we're going to be looking at today is .mp3, purely because that is the file type that Zencastr for free gives you. If you pay, you can get a slightly high quality one, but I think that especially for the kind of the quality is more determined by the actual microphone of the person's computer than the file type. So it's not going to give you a huge issue of quality. But yeah, as you can see here, you can just simply click the MP3 button. I won't do it now, because otherwise it will start the download. But you just click these ones, and they'll appear in your downloads. So yeah, Zencastr is really, really good for remote interviews, and we're mainly looking at that because the subject matter of this is Ukraine, and obviously we didn't go out to Ukraine. So most people are either in Ukraine or we have 1 or 2 here in Glasgow, and for the one in Glasgow, we're going to be showing you in person so that you can see a little bit more of kind of correct mic technique and other stuff, but we'll save that one for the end. The main bulk of these will be focusing on using remotely recorded stuff, having to clean audio, etc. So the next bit then is how to open and install Reaper. So I don't know if anyone has already installed it. It's a really simple. There should be a link somewhere. I can pop it in the chat if anyone needs it. And I'll pop it in the chat then. Let me just get it. Reaper link. I'll just quickly get that to 2 minutes. Yeah, there we go. So you'll just need to select your operating system, whether you're on a Windows or a Mac. Let me put this in the chat. Okay, perfect. So yeah, once you've downloaded that, you'll just need to go through a few installer screens. They should be fairly self-explanatory. But again, if you have any issues or if you're doing it while we go, just let me know. So I'll open up Reaper here so you can have a little look while you're doing that, and just load from my side. And again, you'll see when you open it, this will be the same for you. A little tag that says Reaper is not free, it's a paid product if you use it more than 60 days, etc. It won't stop working after those 60 days. And they're a very ethical company in the sense they kind of expect you to get the license only if you're doing commercial work. And if you're just doing it for yourself, etc., I'm very happy for you to keep going. And I know people, who've used this for years and years without any license, so there's no worry about timescale. So you can just close that. And this is the interface you're presented with. So don't worry too much if it looks very foreign, but we'll go through all the little bits and start with it from the very ground up. So the first thing we're going to do is have a look at bringing some files into the Reaper, into Reaper itself. So from the Zencastr, once you've downloaded those 3 files that we saw, they all have many files depending on the amount of people you're interviewing. They will show up in your downloads. So for me, I think you'll be able to see this. This is my downloads because I'm on a Mac. It might look different for you depending on what you're on, but I made a little folder here. And it's these 3 that I have colored green. You'll see them there. If they're the most recent ones you downloaded, they'll be at the very top. And you can just simply take them, drag, and drop into onto the timeline, so it's called. So the page in Reaper that's slightly lighter gray. And then you get a few different options here. So insert multiple media on separate tracks, or sequentially on a single. So for this, because they're all happening, these 3 files are essentially mine, Eugene's, and Victor's separate audio, but they're all the exact same length. They start at the exact same time. We want them to be on separate tracks so that they can all start at the same time. And as you see here, they come in, they all start. And what I will do is I'm just going to minimize these cameras for a second. So if I zoom out, you'll see that we have the three audio. So it's quite long because it's about 40 minutes worth of audio from the whole interview. So you can see this is Victor. This is our interviewee, and he's speaking predominantly most of the time. This is me up at the top. You can see my name is in the file type here at the end. It says samwelch.mb3, victor.mb3, and eugene.mb3. So you can kind of see here visually, this is where I ask a question. This is Victor's response, another question, a response, etc., etc. So if you guys are following along, I'll just give you a little minute to do that. One sec, let me just put this here.
Everyone who is familiar with the basic video editor, any of them, the audio editor like Reaper works visually in the same kind of context. It's the same timeline where you paste your audio or video files and etc. And the editing kind of working in the similar way as a process for a beginning.
Brilliant. So yeah, I'll give you guys a wee minute to catch up, and I'm just going to rename these tracks just to be my name, Victor's name, and Eugene's name for ease of working. So you can just double click this little name bit here on each track, and this top one I can see from here is Sam. So I'll put my name, Sam Welch. Then this one next is Victor. So I'll just put Victor. And finally we have Eugene. So we put Eugene. Now, what we can also do is, just because I'm very OCD about my session organization, you can also color code them. So if I select them all, so I just simply hold Shift and select all three, you can right click and go track color, set them to a custom color. So we'll just pick a random color. Let's go with this green, just so that everything, it's always easy to know that Victor is in this green section. So now what I also like to do, just for ease of organization, is I'm going to select these three audio files, and I'm just going to hit the G button, or you can go, one sec, let me see, group, yeah. So you can click, either select the three and just hit G, or you can click in this menu up here, items, and then go to group and group items. And so the reason we're doing this is because these three audio files are synced up in terms of time perfectly. So they all start at the exact same point. If we're wanting to put edits in, for example, cut a little section out, we want to do the same edit to all three of them. Otherwise, they'll start going out of sync. And when I ask a question, it'll actually be in the middle of Victor's reply, etc. So when I do the grouping, you'll see this little green chain link button show up. So that just means these three files are grouped to themselves. And now if you see, if I go here and I make a cut, you'll see it cut all three of them, not just the one that was clicked on. So now that they're grouped, the one other thing I'll do for organization is we'll add another track. So you can either right click here and go insert new track, or just the Command T button, or if you're on Windows, Control T. But this here, we're just going to turn this and use this as like a master track for all of these. So we're going to call this Victor, and I'm going to do it in all capitals just to distinguish it from the two. Victor, like that. And then I'm going to select these other three channels, and you can just drop them into you select them and drop them over the track, and you'll see they kind of slide up into the side bit here. And so now this has become a folder, and all of these tracks live inside of this track. When we adjust the volume of this Victor track in general, it adjusts the volume of all the other tracks. And it's super useful when it comes to editing to have that available. So what I'll also do is I'm going to color him. I'm just going to go track color and set it to the same color, or a similar color, because I have to do it fairly. There you go. So now if I fold this there, we have Victor and our three interviewees. So now that we've kind of got the software roughly set up, we'll maybe talk a little bit about the more creative side, the more kind of narrative side of who Victor actually is, why we picked him, and then what we want from it. Because now that we've actually got it laid out in our software, we need to know what we're going to select from him, why we're going to select it, etc. So Victor is a Ukrainian guy. He lives in Uzhhorod, which is one of the towns, sure you know better than me, but right near the west. It's right near the EU, and it's been a very, what's the word, safe town, but not safe in general. Safe as in context of Ukraine, it's been unlikely to be bombed, etc. So it's become a
one of only two regions that haven't been bombed since the war started, and this particular region is bordering with three European countries, Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary, and became like a transition zone for a lot of the refugees who's going to Europe through this side of Ukraine.
Yeah, so Uzhhorod became kind of a refugee capital for these people transitioning through. And Victor has grown up and lived in Uzhhorod most of his life, all his life. And he worked as a tour guide before the war. And now he works as a tour guide, but giving free tours to these refugees that are coming from other parts of Ukraine, but not tours in the traditional sense of this is this historical thing, this is that. These are more functional tours to help people orientate themselves, being in a new city, where to go for a good coffee, where to go to buy grocery supplies, where to go if you need help with bureaucracy related stuff, very practical stuff to help these people. So that's the general gist of him, is how people take the skills they have and appropriate them to help with the humanitarian effort from the most effective way. And this is kind of a general theme that you'll see between the 4 or 5 interviews we have. It's all about selecting people that are helping in humanitarian efforts throughout Ukraine or for Ukraine, but with a skill set that is maybe not traditionally what you think of when you think of a volunteer, etc. Using what people know best. So let me just have a quick look at my notes here on Victor again for 2 minutes. So the sort of questions that we asked him, I will actually put them just in the chat really quickly, just so you can see. These were the pre-designed questions, and from that I think we deviated still a little bit. One second, let me just meeting to everyone. Yeah, so as you can see in the chat, that's just like it was kind of a pre-selection of questions for Victor, and from this we still kind of vamped on it, and based on the way he interacted and reacted, we changed. But one sec, sorry, my computer just had a little moment. But yeah, so today we're going to be focusing in on Victor's story and what we want from it. So what I personally really would like to get is how people can help, like the takeaway from specifically this and the chunks of information are how people can help in ways that they maybe didn't initially think of, or non-traditional means. But again, I really want to make this workshop kind of as collaborative and open. So because we're going to be going through it together, feel free to stop at any point and we can have a discussion about what we want from this audio, why. It's not just me telling you what.
And also, if you have any questions that maybe you find applicable to your target as what you're actually trying to gain and the information from this podcasting course, be free to ask us any of your creative questions as well. We would be glad to assist where we're able to.
Perfect. So what I'll just do is I'm going to hit play now, and we'll hear just the first bit. We won't listen to all 40 minutes, but we'll listen to the first question, which I think relates to his bio, just a very rough background. And also just maybe let me know if the audio is coming through okay, and if not, I'll sort it. Okay, so we'll just play it now.
No audio, Sam?
Yes, no worries. Let me quickly sort that then. Just a few Zoom settings. Share. Let's advanced sharing. No. Give me 2 minutes. I always seem to have issues with the audio side of sharing video over Zoom. If not, I have a second one.
How many audio interfaces you have, Sam?
Actually, On this one, it should be strange. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send an additional link. And this is the way I normally do it professionally. I wasn't going to do it because it's a paid for software and it's not required, but just for this, for these workshops, it'll be easier for you guys because it'll have no latency. So it's just going to be a link that will open in your web browser and you'll hear the audio from the software come out via there. So if you just give me 2 seconds and I will sort that. Oh, actually.
May I ask how you found the people that you interviewed?
So Eugene is probably the best to speak about this, but Eugene has been my fixer in Ukraine, if that's the best way of putting it.
Well, I involved my connections and the people who I know, and knowing what Sam's targeting with this podcast, I tried to build and to find different, very, very polar sometimes stories of people who changed because of this war. And because we aiming to show that every small drop counts, we have more not military oriented help, but more as a help of the people who never would even think about the volunteering in the first place, maybe if anything like that would happen. And I just gathered this stories and contacted my friend, those people. They were more than glad to participate. Also, obviously, we were selecting to have people available to speak English as well, and etc. But our palette kind of include as people who just accidentally caused some help, and it became like a snowball and reached a lot of the people and actually brought a lot of the not feedback but material result first of all, and from the small actions like the victors.
Sorry, Eugene, I don't know what you mean by that, results.
So for example, we probably in the other episode, which Sam gonna discuss, there is a girl, Yelizaveta, and she helped to helped to cross the border of one of the refugees from Uzhgorod. You know, she just was going with her in a car. This connection stayed, and they cooperated, and sharing the network. It's ended up in a full-time transporting of refugees from Transcarpathia to Germany and Austria. And it was just a connection of 2 girls in their 20s. That cost of some actions is still ongoing, or or for example, our other interviewee Daniel, who was an event promoter and a party promoter in Lviv, and now he is the fixer that driving all around Ukraine into the war zones as well, with the either humanitarian help gathered from other communities based all around Ukraine, like event and promo communities, or spaces, clubs, restaurants, or public organizations like museums and etc., which became now in some cities of Ukraine refugee places or a humanitarian kind of warehouses and etc. So this is the stories that shows that yesterday you could be a student of journalism, and tomorrow the war came and you just start to think what you can do. And it's not always to go on the front line and hold the gun, because it should be done professionally as well. But there's can be a multiple different ways how even the small actions like Victor's actions when he being a tourist guide and his city became a massive refugee camp for whole Ukraine, for lots and lots of Ukrainians, and he just share and try to make this place for a couple of weeks when the refugees are there a little bit more home-alike to them, even though they probably right now thinking about their bombed house in Mariupol, or they thinking that they cannot come back to Zaporizhia and etc. So even the small psychological help, it's still, I think, a large, in a longer scale, it's a large result, in my opinion. So That's what I meant. If I answered your question.
Very much so. Thank you.
All right.
Did you manage to get that link working? So I just sent a link to the chat, and
Oh,
you
yes.
just need to click it, and I think it says start listening or something to that effect. So since I've already used the thing, I'll just quickly explain what that is so you're not totally confused. Basically, for my freelance mixing work that I do for music, it's really common for clients to want to sit and listen to what you're doing in real time while you do it, but not necessarily be in the same room. So this is just an external third party, it's called a plugin, that you put on the master fader, which is this fader here in the bottom left corner, which is where all the audio and everything goes to. And from there, I can just send a link, and it does, it streams the audio at MP3 quality directly online. And it's the whole point of it is super fast, super latency, low latency, which means low delay between the time of it playing and you actually hearing it. So I just did that because Zoom's audio drivers can be a bit funny, and this will probably be an easier way to work. So I'll hit play now and just see if you guys hear it, just give me a wee thumbs up or something.
Yes, Sam.
Perfect. So that's this first little segment that we'll maybe start breaking down. So what the goal is I'm kind of aiming to make these blocks, and we'll talk a little bit later about this idea of creating little narrative blocks, but this bit is his bio, his intro. So we want to condense down all the stuff he said about him, take out maybe bits that are a bit meandering, just to make it as punchy, to make it as informative as possible, but equally still kind of show his personality. So what I will do first, which is just to set the software up a little, in this corner up here in the top left, you can see there's these various buttons, and there's this magnet here. And if you hover over it, it says snap enabled. So what this is, you can see there's little lines here on the screen, line, line, line. This is for when you're working with music and it's got a tempo and a rhythm, you're working to bars and these subdivisions, so you work with the grid. But when you are working with something like this, like speech, which has no rhythm in that sense, I will just take this off, and this lets you put the cursor anywhere. So for example, before, if it's on, you'll see the cursor sits here and it will jump to this one if I click. I can't click in the middle. But if I take this off, it'll let me click in the middle, it'll let me click anywhere in between, which is what we really want for speech when it's not timed to a metronome or anything. So let's just have a listen from the beginning again. And what we'll do is we're going to cut out sections or make markers of stuff we like. So to cut here in Reaper, what I just use is I click and I hit S, which separates it. That's the way I think of it, S for separate. But equally, just so you know where that is, I think it's somewhere. I never actually use this, this bit in the top. I think it is here. Yeah, so if you go item, split items at cursor, and it shows you there, the shortcut is S. So this blue line here is your cursor. And yeah, If you just hit S, it'll separate. So I'll play again from the beginning, and we'll just select out a few bits. We'll just put cuts between sections we like, and potentially we can even color code them if we really like. So let me have a wee look. So as you can see, while I was listening through, I'm kind of reading the waveform. So I guess this kind of becomes a skill you just develop with more time of looking at the software. But I can kind of see that this blob here is his so, which we don't really need. It's not adding anything. So let's just have a listen again to the section I've cut, and then I put a little cut here again. And this is like a little chunk of information. Okay, so we've got that little section. It's going to be a bit tricky to cut this so, because you'll find this a lot with editing people's vocals when you try cut stuff out. People tend to tie words together, and you sometimes have to get a bit creative, or sometimes your edit just won't work because they've tied the beginning of another word with the ending of the word before it. So what I'm going to do here to make things really simple and really clear is take these 3 tracks and right click on them and go duplicate. So now you'll see we have double the amount of tracks, but what I'm going to do is zoom out. So you can zoom out using on the 2 bars, you have the X and Y axes. I'm going to do this so we can see everything that's happening. That's everything. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And on these lower 3, I'm going to delete all of those 3. So these duplicated tracks we just made are going to be there to drop stuff down, so that once we make a selection, for example, up here you can see we made these cuts. Instead of having to try and remember which are the ones the cuts we like and which are the cuts we don't like, we can simply just zoom in a little bit more so you can see. Sorry for the repetitive clicking. So here we can just take these 1, 2, 3. And we just simply drag them down. So you can just go tuk, 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 and they're dragged down. So now here, what we can do is select Victor and call it, I will use the word comp like this. And that stands for, actually, I don't know what it stands for, but it's a very common word inside the audio world for compilation. That's it, sorry. To comp something is usually, for example, if you record a lot of vocals for a song, you have to comp the vocals together. You select the different takes, the different parts. So I use the word comp here just so that I know this is the good take, this is the bits that I really want, and then above is kind of the spares. And it's also really nice because you can visually see where you've worked up into, because sometimes you might spend, not just one sitting cutting a podcast together, but a few days, so you can open back up and continue working from wherever you are on the timeline. So before we go back in, I'm just going to do a save, because that's very good practice and I haven't done that since the beginning. So I'm just going to go save project as, and I'm going to call this Victor, Victor, podcast 1. I'm just going to have it like this. And what I like to do is go, and I do this mainly from my professional work. I do Samuel edit in all capitals 1. And what this means is that sometimes you'll want to do a very drastic change, for example, like, oh, you know what, I'm going to try and restructure this full thing, but you don't want to delete the work you've done previously, or you want the ability to go back. So what you can do is just do another file, save as, and then call it edit 2 and edit 3. And through that way, you can always revisit stuff, stuff that you maybe did in the past that you like, but now you can't remember how you did it. So what I'm going to do is then you select, you've named it, you select a little drop-down menu. So for me, I'm going to just put this on my desktop just so it's simple. So as you can see here, and it'll be called Victor Podcast Soundwash Edit 1. Here you have copy all media into project directory. So this means that whenever we drag stuff in, so we brought in these files, if you don't tick that box, it's going to save them from wherever you drag them in, which can cause a lot of problems if you want to just take that session file and go to another computer and work, because it'll say that the files are missing. So you want to copy all the media and move all the media into the project directory. Sorry, you want to either copy or move, because if you copy, you make a duplicate. If you move, it'll take it from within the downloads folder or whatever and put it inside of the project folder. So for safety, I'm just going to go copy so that we always have a backup. And then I'm just going to hit save. And you'll see it does a little thing. It analyzes some files. And then once it's done that, we'll be all good to go back in and select continue cutting. So now that we go in, let's continue cutting, and we'll try to get to the end of this this little introduction section or something, kind of get the bio roughly worked out. So I'll zoom in again, and maybe a good wee exercise is just try to read the waveform as we go and see if you can tell what words are which little blob, essentially. So I'm just going to go back here again and see where a good edit start point is. Okay, so here, this is also interesting. So we're going to select this and then this, and we'll take out that timing pause. So I know it looks like I've just done a lot of cuts, but I will quickly pull them down and we'll see that it's not too ridiculous. So here we go. If we pull these down, I went too far. There. And then we'll take, so this is the beginning of his sentence. And then because we have the powers of digital magic, instead of having the kind of pause when he's thinking, we can just take that totally away, delete these bits like that. I'm just hitting backspace or delete once I've clicked on them. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. There we go. And drag these down here. So now what we can do is we can have a listen to these, the cadence and flow, because the most important thing when it comes to editing speech from like a technical aspect outside of the narrative is that there's a certain natural cadence the voice has. And if you don't match it right, it'll sound very strange. Either it'll sound like a robot is speaking, or it'll sound like you very clearly edited it. And I think from a technical aspect of podcast making, that's maybe the hardest bit to get used to, is figuring out what you can do with the audio editing software, which is quite a lot, but then also how to do it in natural ways. So let's have a little play here. And I've just cut out that time space, and we might need to tweak this gap that is here. And then we'll talk a little bit about these things appearing here, which are called crossfades after. So play. So that's a fairly smooth edit to me. I'll have another playback again, but it doesn't sound hugely like we cut out a big chunk of information in the middle. Yeah, so I'm quite happy with how that edit sounds. So I'll quickly mention a very important thing to make these edits sound good. 1 second, let me just edge over. So these little things here, you can see when my cursor hovers over it, it changes to this little shape with 2 arrows. And these are crossfades. So essentially what it's doing is when the 2 audio sources meet, in Reaper this will automatically create it for you. In other softwares you might have to actually create it yourself. But these little things essentially fade out this audio clip at the same time as fading this other one up. So you get a very natural transition. And if you don't have crossfades, you can sometimes get little clicks and pops, because it's not, without getting too technical, it's not bringing all the audio down to 0 on the one clip. It's just cutting it, and it could cut right in the middle of a loud section, etc. So sometimes if you're,
How did you get them to appear?
So it's just a case of dragging. Let me show you an example up here with this one. So let me scroll here. So if I cut this in the middle, I separate it. You see they already naturally appear. But then if you drag these 3 over to it, you'll see it changes them. But equally, you can also zoom in here and adjust. Well, I need to zoom in a little bit more. It can be a bit finicky with the cursor.
It works like your fader. So literally we fade one sample out and fade another one in, makes the cut unaudible.
Yeah. What is the shortcut for cut?
S, yes.
S.
So just, yeah, so if you just
okay,
click.
same.
No.
I completely, this is past my mind. I have done a lot of interviews, some that needed translation, and I made them into visual films because they were very emotional, and I wanted people to get, tiny amount of words to understand what that meant in the heart and soul. And I did that in Final Cut Pro. So all the little tools here are news to me and wonderful.
Yeah, that's the video editing software is really nice because it is a very similar interface, but with the audio one, they give you so many more little in-depth things that are easy to do with audio. But yeah, so the little crossfades, you just hover over it, and sometimes it's a bit tricky. It can be annoying to get, but yeah, if you hear your edit too much, you might hear like a voice go, ooh, kind of when you hear the voice fade up in a very unnatural way. You can mess around with the shape as well, so you can pull them left to right when you do it properly, so you can see. So yeah, you can see this changes the fade. So essentially, what these lines represent, this is the fade in of the second clip. So this clip here, this is the fade in. And this little line here is the fade out. So imagine this is volume and it's going down, 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 and 0. And this is volume going up, 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 and full. And the way you shape that in terms of length, but also internal shape like that, changes how you hear the fade. And the goal rarely, unless you're doing it for specifically creative kind of sound designy reasons, is to not hear it, essentially, like for this example that we just did with taking out a few words from Victor. Let's just zoom out again. So do you have any questions more about fades or cutting or anything at all?
S is B.
What's all right?
So S is the equivalent of blade.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I have this habit with all the softwares, remembering the different short keys by like English words. So the S for me is separated. In other software I use R and T or Zoom, so it's like retract and tighten. I don't know if that's beneficial to you, but for me, I seem to assign the word, like a word that relates to it with the beginning of the letter, and that's how I memorize them. But yeah, S is probably going to be the most important one for you in terms of making podcasts or anything.
In any editing, this is the most important.
Yeah. So I'll play again from this one, and we'll have a listen to that edit, and then we'll just keep going and just select more bits. So what I'm doing while we go through is just looking at the waveform, thinking kind of on the fly, does this resonate with me on a creative level? Does this resonate with me on like the thematic narrative that we've thought about before, which is the humanitarian aid, etc., and then just making markers. And again, what we'll do is we'll come back and revisit this. So you don't need to be too perfect that this has to be exactly what I want when I cut it, and etc. We'll come back and do a revised one. So okay, so I really like this bit to do with him talking about his passion, because it both relates to him biographically, but it's also very personal, and it actually ties the subject of him being a tour guide to his own personality and how he views it. So there's a bit of, I don't want to say waffling, but I'm going to use the term waffling just because it's clear. There's little bits of waffling that I think we can edit out. So maybe we'll look at how we can condense this down to still say exactly that and keep this really nice ending. It's very personal, but just take some of the bits from up here and condense it. So let's see if we can try to take that and away. So I'm going to try see if we can start the sentence with I. This might not always work, but so I'm going to try this and see how this sounds. If I delete these, it might sound very unnatural. We might need to play with this fade as well. But so it's almost there. It's a little bit abrupt. So what I'll do is I'll bring this fade in here, just to kind of the start of where he speaks, and have a listen. So I think that potentially could work, just because I like it starting. Again, this is maybe a personal taste thing, but I really like sentences starting kind of strongly in podcasts. And when you have things starting from, I guess, tangential words like and or so and then, etc., it feels like it's cut together a bit more than if you use these stronger sentence starters. But that's also just my personal taste. I don't think you should use that as a rule necessarily. So I'm going to see if there's a different way we can get him to say he's been doing it for 10 years without repeating the sightseeing tours, because he kind of implies this here. I'm not sure if there is a way we can. So I don't think we can actually get rid of this bit, but I think what we can do is, I'm just going to get rid of that cut here. So there we go. But we can get rid of this maybe, I think. And then we can just go straight to hobby. So what we can actually do is take this bit away. Again, I'm just clicking them and just hitting delete. And then dropping these down here. Ooh, there we go. As you'll see, if you want to drag more, it'll actually create tracks for you there. So you can see these ghost tracks appear on the left-hand side, that if I was to let go by them, they would make new tracks. So that's another way of doing the little drop-down section. So now we have this and we want to connect it to here. So let's see where we should stop it. Okay, so as you can see, I just selected when you'll find that with the cursor, when you hover it by the ends of audio clips, they change shape, especially as you move it up and down the height. So I moved it until I got this little dual arrow, and that means you can drag where the cut is inside of the audio. So I'm going to play again and just find I'll refer to them as edit points, which is basically the point of like cutting in and cutting out. So I'm going to see, we might not be able, I'd like to just end it on passion because that gives us the flexibility to move this little chunk of audio wherever we need it, but it might not be possible. So I'm thinking we can maybe have it, I'm doing my best. Again, these are all decisions on the fly, so we'll find out how well they work, but I think that would be a case of putting this kind of fade out. And as you can actually see, if I do the fade out, it physically changes the graph of the audio, so you can see what it's doing. It's turning these down in volume. Now, I wouldn't recommend putting a fade, for example, like this over audio, unless you're trying to have the effect of them fading out, like them getting quieter, because you will hear it. So what I'll do is I'm kind of putting it halfway here, so it just fades that last little bit. And that sounds like it could be natural. So what we will do is, again, just zoom out here, drag down. There we go. And now we'll just look at putting these two together. So I'm just going to scroll over to the left. Okay. So now we have 10 years, and we start with okay, so let's try this again. Okay, so we're missing the word it's. This is a thing you'll find as well. You often go, you realize that you're missing words, and you might eventually, if you really want to use a sentence in a certain way, you end up stealing a word from further down the way that's like the joining word sometimes.
From other sentences.
Okay, that's almost natural. And I also like this pause, but I think we can make it slightly shorter. Again, this is probably just my over-the-top OCD-ness, but just make it like a half a second shorter. Yeah, and again, that decision for me, like from the creative side, is all about the cadence of how he lands the words before it. You can kind of hear, if you listen, at least for me, there's a clear kind of tempo rhythm that he's speaking with, and by moving this back a little bit, it just kind of lined up, so you see these accents, which you can see visually here and here, here, they all kind of fall in the same expected place. So yeah, that's like that's something I pay a lot of attention to. And again, you can also use that for creative effect in terms of the way people speak, because a podcast is so heavily based on speech. The one thing you have to play with a lot is the timings, like the cadence and not the tonality itself, but for example, here, if you wanted to make this incredibly juxtaposed and maybe the topic or it was relevant to have it feel very odd, you could actually push a pause to feel a bit uncomfortable instead of making it land in that cadence. And that can in turn kind of embed itself to the narrative structure of the whole podcast. So once you get the hang of the tools more, you can get more and more creative with these like these very little subtle things that are not necessarily huge changes, but have like an overall impact to the piece on a more subconscious level. So we'll listen again to this little block, and then we'll move on to the next bit of the podcast, I think. Perfect there. So that's a little segment there. And let's just go to the end of this this question bit here. So as you can see, I haven't asked any questions here. You can see I'm this top one here. So this is a question from me. This is a question from me. I've just realized that potentially Eugene actually got overwritten. Yes, so there's actually a wee error here that I've somehow managed to do and duplicate myself whilst not duplicating. Oh no, sorry, Eugene is here, but it duplicates it in a very strange order. So I've realized the naming has gone a bit funny, but that's okay. We'll just rename this again. So we have a duplicate of me, so we'll call the second one
Sam,
Eugene. Yeah?
Sam, I think you're wrong. Look at the picture of the audio files. They're similar. It's the same audio file.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm going to have to drag the other one in. But that won't be a problem because you are only speaking at the end.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
So I'll put that there, and then here we'll just rename these. So yeah, as you can see, there was a double Eugene. I think somehow in the naming system, when it duplicated the files, it did it in a funny way. So this is Victor, and the reason I know that is because you can see his audio file. He's the main one speaking, and these two are actually irrelevant who they are right now because neither of them have audio. So the most important one really is the Victor comp. But we'll just keep the other ones there, and when it comes to it, we will sort it. So I'm just going to drag in Eugene's audio, so we have him one more time, and this will go here. I'm just going to do it on a separate track, so you get to see the full fault finding and correction in real time. Let me just see. There we go. Let's drag that in. Now this should say Eugene. Yep, as you can see, it says Eugene. And what we want to do is I'm going to line this up with the beginning of the very first one. So here, I'm gonna in. I'm on a Mac, so I can do this kind of pinch thing for Zoom, but you might not be able to, so don't stress at all. So let me just line these up, and I'm going to zoom in further. Ooh, my cursor is miles away now. One sec. So the zoom works that it centralizes on wherever you've put this line. So now you can see the cursor is there. If I zoom, it's gonna zoom over this specific section. And what I'm gonna do is just make sure it's perfectly lined up here with these. Then I'm going to simply drag it down over Eugene's name. So as you can see here, go there, and all of this I'm just going to select like that, and that will be fine for now. So we'll finish this little section here, and then we'll maybe have little questions and discussion, maybe take a wee tea break, and then pop back. So let's just go through the second half of his bio, because I also think that it's important to spend a bit of time on the bio of the person so that you can actually get a full spectrum of them before you dive into the more deeply rooted exact narrative. Okay, so I really like, again, what he said here, and there's just a few bits to take out, I think. So let's have a listen back from here again. So I really like this bit just because he's kind of affirming his non-traditional methods of tours, because I think that's something, at least me personally, I really want to dispel from this idea, because we're talking about, in the narrative context, humanitarian help and giving tours. I think it's important at the very beginning to set the scene that he's not giving tours of very irrelevant facts to people that are in need. You know, here's historical things you don't worry about. It's much more practical and personal. So I think this is an important bit to include, and just see what we can do to condense it down and make it flow nicely and have a little cadence. So let me see this bit again. So then he ends the sentence like this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is select these bits here. For some reason, I'm just going to clear that for a minute. So I think that I'm just going to drag this clip out. So what you can also do, if you decide that actually you want more of the bit you selected, you can just go again, hover on the edge, and you'll get the same little pointy arrow dual way. And you can either shorten it or extend it. And I think that actually the way he said it is the nicest and the most natural. And I just by listening back to it, I could kind of tell that if I went ahead and tried to edit out certain words, there's not enough words that it would be able to feel natural. And I think that even if it adds a few extra seconds, it's not impacting it more than the edits I would have to do to take them away. So nope, that's just because I doubled it here, it's taken away. Okay, so I think we can take out, as we saw here, these little bits. I think this, let me play it from here. Okay, so the I think we can definitely get rid of. So I'm just going to drag this to here, delete this, and then see how these guys, how these join. So I'm just again selecting these three and just joining. So you can hear that that's too fast. That cadence just seems very unnatural. So we're going to see what we can do by pulling out this one. And you can see here, this is a kind of a helpful tip that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Where his next word is in this sentence is usually the most natural place for his spoken cadence to join. So if you pull it out and then match this bit here, which you can see is the word we're wanting to have, with that there, and then simply take the fade and drag it back. So you just click on the right-hand side of, this is called the crossing point, where they cross over. The right-hand side will affect this side of it, and you can pull it. The left-hand side will affect this side of it, and you can pull it like that. So on the right-hand side, and just pull it back like that. So it's the smaller the fade, usually the better. It's harder to make a small fade work, but when a smaller, shorter fade works, it's much more discreet and less audible than a longer fade. So if I play now, let's see what that sounds like. We're missing. So he actually says, "So my name," and I'm not sure how we can come out of this. So let's just have a listen and a little think about creative ways to join that. Okay, so we can actually, so we could potentially, we're going to try this, and it might be a very tricky edit. We can maybe have it end on him saying "Mayor," and it's my main objective. And this might sound terrible, but it's good, I think, for you to see me struggle with it and see what you can potentially do or potentially not do. So this could work. You can hear that it's still very choppy and not at all natural, but potentially, let's just have a listen again. There, and so see if we can extend this a bit more. And I'm just, again, trying to line up the and with, okay, so I can kind of see this little bit here. That is the s, I think. So we want to kind of delete the s and like this. So maybe this is going to be a very tricky edit. And my main, and the word he says before this, I think is so. I think it is just the middle bit that we're trying to cut out. So again, this might be a case of sacrificing. I think this might be a case of having to leave that in and then make a decision later on. And again, you never quite know where your podcast is going to go. So you might end up deciding that you have a bunch of ambient sound, for example, and you create a very dense kind of environmental soundscape that happens over the top of the interview, in which case you can sometimes get away with unnatural speech. But when the speech is just speech and that's all you're hearing is a conversation, it's very hard to get away with any unnatural vocal edits, unless it's for an effect to make it sound unnatural. But if later on you decide, okay, there's going to be music underneath it, there's going to be sound effects, which we're going to have a look at in later workshops about how to use your phone to record open source environmental noises, how to find free music, etc. But yeah, if you're using kind of more densely layered podcasting formats, you can definitely get away with potentially a dodgy edit like that. So that's where the revision method of going back and revising stuff can come in handy. So I'll just play this out again and just do the end edit point and have a listen. Okay, perfect. So that's a really nice little section. I think that's the end of his bio, his intro section. So if I zoom out here, you can see these are the bits we've selected from it, and these are the bits we've taken out. Now, we've probably taken a bit more than we would normally from other questions, and that's mainly because this is the most personalized bit of his story. You know, this is us essentially setting the scene for the podcast. So I really want to make sure that we have that kind of background info. And also I really think that in this interview in particular with Victor, he did a really nice job of introducing himself. So I just really like his manner of speaking and general kind of style. So maybe that's also why I was more haphazard to select more and more. But what I'm going to do is just delete these. Now they're not deleted forever, because what I can always do is drag these out and it'll reappear. But it's just my own organization that I like to kind of clear up the section now that it's done and trim this to here. And what we'll quickly do is maybe pull them together so we can see it. So what I'll do, just so we can see where the different chunks are, is I'm going to make them two different colors and alternate the colors like a checkerboard. So I just select them. I select the three and I right click and go somewhere in here. Items and take colors. Set items to custom color. It can be a bit annoying, or you can go to random color, but we're going to go to custom color and we're going to make it, for some reason I have a graphical error. This should be a colorful wheel, not a black circle. Oh, there we go. So I'm just going to select something kind of quite different like this blue, and I'm going to add it there. So, okay. And now we're just going to make the little comp sections. So not wherever there's a gap, we're going to color code them. And this is just so when you stitch them together in one big lattice, you can easily see where the different blocks or chunks are, so to say. So I'm going to take this again and select the same color. You can just use that dropper tool to get the identical color. And so that's it. There's only 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, there's only 5 little sections. So what I'm going to do is drag these, and I'm going to work from the front to the back. So usually best practice as a general rule, but it always gets broken, is to work from left to right. Because if you start making changes, for example, if I move this and I do a perfect crossfade, but then I move everything, that crossfade is going to be stretched. So once you get stuff in place, you don't really want to move it around too much. And when you do move it around, you really want to consider how that's going to affect the other pieces of audio and all your perfect edits that you spend hours hours obsessing over, kind of thing. So I'm just going to zoom across here, and as you can see, we're going to join these two pieces. So it's going from, so we can just make these like this. Works from a conversational standpoint that we can probably just do something like this and then tweak here. So I don't know what this noise is. We'll have a listen and see if we want to drag either the crossfade this way or this way. So we probably don't want that. So I think if it's possible, we can just do this and then drag the fade right there and like this. So we might need to clip this. So I'm just going to go separate again. And again, every time I drag this, what I'm going to do is zoom out to make sure there's not other clips attached to it that I'm going to drag away. So it's an important thing to remember. It can be a bit annoying, but you can't just select this. In this case, we can, but in general, you might have, for example, a whole bunch of edits like this in the file. And if you drag these, you're only going to drag them and end up messing up the positioning of the other ones. So I'm just undoing that with the Command Z option. Very, very useful option to undo anything you've done. If you just did something you have no idea what it is, just Command Z, and it should put it back to how it was. So again, I'm just going to do this and delete these here. So let's try this now. Cool, so it's almost there. Now we just need to fix that breath, and usually breath's kind of nice and easy. We can maybe even put a slow, long fade over that section. So let me just pull it out and see how that sounds. Okay, so it's maybe a little bit fast. We can maybe edge this very, very slightly this way. And it can be very finicky and finessing, and that's just part of it. So you can hear that we have that starting, and we'll just mess around with fades and see what we can do to get rid of that. Yeah, bring it a little bit more here. So there's a little funky edit, but we can potentially get away with that for now because we'll do the finalized edit. So I'm just going to kind of drag these all together so we can have a little quick listen through to what roughly the narrative for this chunk is, like the introduction chunk. So I'm just going to go here and just select these and just drag them all in line so there's very little space. And they won't necessarily have perfect edits just yet, but they'll have the general flow. And at least when I do stuff, I really like to re-reference the flow of things to understand what I'm actually trying to do, because it's very easy to get tunnel vision sometimes. And the most important thing at the end of the day is always the story, not the quality of the edit you've done. Perfect. So that's kind of our first block. That's kind of our first block from the line of questioning done. And you can see pretty much how much time we've taken off. So before this blank area, this was what it was. So we've condensed that down. It's not been hugely condensed. You can definitely do a lot more, but we've taken off maybe, you can see the timer here, it probably started at about 35 seconds. Probably took about 30 seconds off or so all in all. But yeah, do you have any questions at all, or anything relating to the stuff I've just done, or just have no idea of something I've tried to do?
It's very similar to what I do in Final Cut Pro.
Oh, perfect.
So the only difference is the S and the V, the crossfade, the amount you can do with it, the different ways you can change it is a lovely asset.
Yeah. You know, it's a very, very functional feature, and they're kind of one of those tricky things, like in the world of technical audio-y stuff. They're really easy at first to understand, but they do take a bit of time to really get to master, but you should be able to use them straight off the bat fairly simply. It's just the better and better you get with them, the more ridiculously kind of well-considered edits you can do. And they can also be really creative for sound design. You know, you can end up merging different sounds together. But yeah, do you have any questions in terms of like narrative or why we picked stuff, or even just comments if you were like, oh, actually, I don't think this needs to be picked, or anything?
I think you could possibly take out "I'm doing my best."
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think the end of it, I'm turning, I don't know what the word is, but it's a word for tourists into locals. I think that is the most succinct, elegant sales pitch of what he does that I've ever heard for anybody doing anything.
Yeah, I think I agree. So let's do that right now, actually, because yeah, this is like we've only done the interviews, and this is the first time I'm hearing them again as well. So it's I'm open to any any suggestions. Oh wait, no, it's not here. No, where is it? I think it's in this blue chunk. Okay, small, yes. So we ended with. Okay, yes. So we need. So where did you say we could maybe end it on?
Passion, but it might not work.
Yeah, I think
it's up here, and the next one's down there.
Yeah, well, let's try do it. But yeah, I think I thought of that, and then went, oh, I don't think this edit will work, but we'll find out very quickly. Passion. If we do it really intelligently, it might work. So what I'm going to do is I'm dragging these up here, and I'm just going to mute them. So you can see these M and S. This stands for mute and solo. So solo is just listen to that track. So for example, if we want to just hear Victor's track, which we are anyway right now, but we would just hit the solo button. But I'm going to mute these so that we can hear without deleting them. We just put them on another track that's not being played out loud. Yeah, so we need to see if we can find the N. Basically, the way I would do it is drag it out until I find an N and then put a fade just after it. Passion. Maybe fade this, but it might be a bit abrupt, but we'll see. Maybe drag it out more and see how much we can get out of it. That's almost right. That's almost there. Yeah, that's getting closer and closer. And I'm just going to keep nudging until it goes too far, and then we know we've reached the limit. Yeah, just I think the tiniest bit in. And that can potentially work. And yeah, I completely agree that this bit wasn't necessarily necessary. I just thought the edit wouldn't work, but actually I think it works perfectly. And then yeah, and we can even, because we'll probably most likely stitch these two parts together, this breath can actually help transition that little, which sometimes you want to take out, but in this case can help with an edit point because you can hide a dodgy edit under a breath and you won't actually hear it. So perfect. Yeah, so if you have any other questions, we can go over them or mess around, or even just things you want to see if it's possible. And otherwise, we can take maybe a wee 15-minute break, grab a tea, consolidate some stuff in your head, and then go back and just continue cutting our way through. And we can maybe make it more collaborative now that I've kind of given some of the tools. We can go and make some group decisions and have like discussion about it, if that sounds good.
That sounds good. I have no idea who the other interviewees are. But
yes,
even though I have no idea, I absolutely love that perhaps this is the entry point because it is such an invite into something deeper.
Yeah. Although... No, absolutely. So what I'm hoping to do, the plan with this, if all goes to plan in terms of like narrative, is that we're going to be making these sectional blocks. So I'll quickly talk about this before break because it's quite an important bit, I guess, of what we're wanting to do. Is to create these sectional blocks. So like you can see here, this is intro. And in fact, what I will do is I'm going to make a marker here and call this intro Victor so that we know. But so I'll quickly do that first before I continue. And that is under, it's normally just M that I hit, but I want to find the exact place so you can see it and then do it however you wish. Is it on track? I never use these top menus, so I just need to flip through them. Marker, yeah. So it's under insert, marker. And you'll see this little red thing shows up and you can double click on it and call it here. So I'm going to call it intro Victor. And just, I usually do things in all capital when they're like designating a region for it. In this case, it all belongs to Victor's case. And we can even give him a custom color. If we give him green because his tracks are green, we can make the marker green. And then all the markers for Victor are green. And we know. But yeah, so the plan is to make these kind of blocks of information that go, okay, Victor's intro, then another section about whatever he's talking about next. I don't even have the questions in front of me just yet, but maybe to do with where he's from in Ukraine. And we have these separate little blocks. And the idea is that if we make the blocks succinct enough and full enough within themselves, we can interchange the different blocks from all the different interviews into whichever way that fits our narrative, but they should be able to be fairly interchangeable. Now, I can't say that for sure because we'll only really know once we've got to cutting it all, but that's the plan. So make the best story within that little section itself, and then we can go back again and re-reference, and maybe we decide that actually this block and this block should just be put together and reduced like 50% each, but just become one singular bit, and it's a more whole. So at least the way I approach narrative audio work or work in general is very reductive process. It's kind of, you take everything and then you slowly whittle it away and carve and carve and carve. But yeah, so maybe we'll take a little 15-minute break, grab a tea, and then come back and just continue cutting away, if that sounds good.
Sure. Should we should say
No.
So I can't believe I forgot at the beginning of the session. I did a very long 3-year project that was the touring exhibition on forgiveness, on the process of forgiveness. And it was commissioned by an organization in Sunderland, and I started working with refugees. So we're talking different languages, different accents. And then I live in Scotland. I needed people from Scotland, and I started working with veterans in Renfrewshire, and realized, especially based on my own experience, that I had a hellacious time trying to understand a Sunderland accent in the beginning. I used to go down and study there every Sunday. I'm like, what? So I said to everybody, do it in the language you're most comfortable in, and we'll translate it. And that, and I had a translator. But this new project is to work with a group of older people, some of whom are much older, some of whom can't get out at all. And it's based on the lived experience of well-being in the natural world. I also work in VR. And so many of these clients can't even go outdoors. So I'm going to be teaching them how to build their own immersive experience within a headset. But it's going to be a 2-layer map, a map of the lived experience of well-being in this area. And artworks will be made in response to the artworks they make in this program of lots of different kinds of art activity. And in the second year, that map is overlaid with the direct threat to that lived experience of well-being caused by climate crisis. Oh. And artworks will be made inspired by that. And
wow,
I really love working with stories. And the project I did before was on forgiveness, because Eugene was not there when I said that, I don't think. They're really powerful. And I'm hoping that older people who obviously have more lived experience than younger people can actually, their agency can affect change. I live in a very agricultural, to people who need to hear it, like agricultural businesses and government.
Amazing. No, that sounds like a very, very cool project. Very, very interesting. The other thing I was gonna mention, so I don't know how much this relates to you, but the idea is that ideally, or if you want, depending on how much time you have, to make a podcast along with this workshop. So to kind of at the end of this develop your own sort of idea of narrative, what you want it to be about, etc. I don't know if that ties into what your plans are. There's no requirement or pressure to, but if you wanted to, it would be great to kind of develop your own narrative piece, and then essentially one workshop behind each one. We kind of set homework, I guess is the best way of putting it, to go and teach you how to record location sounds using a phone, and then the next session between that week you can go and mess around with recording sounds that you might find relevant specifically for your podcast. Because I'm a very firm believer, at least from the way I work personally, that I always need like an impetus to do the work. I always want to do something for a project. I'm never a big fan of just doing exercises for the sake of exercises, but maybe that's just me. Yeah, so if you want to, that'd be great. We can talk about them and develop stuff together, or completely on your own. But also if you've got plenty of stuff.
No, I think that would be great. I do make a lot of field recordings with my phone. Perfect. And although some of these people are like 90, a lot of them are in a WhatsApp group for one of the walking groups that covers a large area of Aberdeenshire. And one of the things they'll be taught is how to use their phone to make not only field recordings, but just record their own thoughts and make their own podcasts.
Cool. This is the same thing that we are aiming, even though we prepared obviously a more complex kind of concept story-wise, so we have a multiple interviews and etc. However, at the end of this workshop, if you're going to be able, using the tools that we showcased during the workshop, just a one episode of imaginary podcast on a topic that you decide, and which is obviously you have some ideas or already. That would be a great result, and also practical output for you as well.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so maybe just have a wee think about that in the back of your head, and if you have any questions about what narrative stuff you want to do or anything at all, feel free to just ask them at any point. And in the meantime, I guess we'll just continue on with Victor's blocks, making little blocks. So we'll listen. This is the next question I asked him. So we'll hear me questioning, and then we will hear Victor speak. So I'm just taking that.
So confusing to understand who's talking.
Okay, so I'm just going to stop it there just because it's a huge chunk. He really has a nice section of speaking, and we'll maybe tackle the first half. And yeah, I think we can just make it kind of an open discussion. But what I really like about this, especially the beginning half, is him interrelating his own personal ties with the cultural history of the place. And I think that will work really nicely in terms of actually cutting that in. I think he thought very carefully about how he was going to speak, because this perfectly kind of relates to the first question in the way that he answered, where he talks about the historical parts of Uzhgorod, and then we have like a perfect transition point to go into describing Uzhgorod from a historic standpoint, but equally we have the same personal kind of the personal elements that are in the introduction. He reintroduces by talking about his cultural heritage, which is kind of in parallel to the history of Uzhgorod. So I'll play it again, and with that in mind, we can maybe think about bits. Really, I really like overall Victor is a really, really good podcast interview. He speaks very succinctly and nicely, so it's actually kind of difficult to thin out bits without changing the meaning, but let's see what we can do.
But also when you're podcasting, you never know.
So I'm thinking of this bit, we can maybe get a little bit creative. The only downside is he doesn't say Uzhgorod, but we can maybe make that just have to tie in with what he says before. So we can say this is one of the last. So from here, I think this little blob is this. Yeah, so split it there. Now, I actually have a question. Which do we feel is maybe more important to say, border with the EU or list the separate countries? Because I don't think there's necessarily a point in listing both, because the one implies the other. But I'm undecided myself which takes more precedent of the importance to the story. So we can either cut it so that he has it has a border with the EU, or it has a border with Hungary, Slovakia, Romania a little bit.
I don't know. I would leave probably the names of the countries, maybe, and etc. Because Ukraine have borders with multiple EU countries and etc. So if we personalize the region, then it may be important to. And also, he's highlighting that he's a Hungarian speaking minority, while his mom is a Slovakian ethnicity.
Yeah,
but Ukrainian born and Ukrainian identified person as well. So. Saying concretely what countries we have borders with, maybe showcasing the picture more in a whole palette.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a great thing. So let's do that little edit now.
Yeah, I think as he speaks, as he says each name of country, people will have an image in their minds that the EU does not lend itself to as a whole.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
That's right.
Definitely. Yeah. So so we'll cut it here. So we want all of this bit between this cut. If I can zoom in there, and then so we have we can try to take that we and then see how that relates. So we've got before the border with so we can
maybe you can even start from that. We just have a major border checkpoints.
Yeah,
that can straight ahead.
Yeah, and just leave the first bit. We have. Did they say we have? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Does he say anything here? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we can just start. We can just take these bits away actually, and just start it very much from. Okay. We can maybe take away those. We were always.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I just? I don't feel that checkpoints belongs there. Because
Yeah.
that's not really what that's about.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah.
if you-
Yeah, maybe we can take that out. Let's see. Yeah, borders. Maybe what we need to do is we can take the word borders potentially from the bit before and splice it in. Border. So this doesn't always work. This can be a very tricky little one, but it's good to.
It's
And then borders. It's not plural, but we'll see. Yeah, zoom out and drag this kind of here. And I think this is actually, it's doing a doubling. So what we need to do is take this back here and delete the word border. So we can just take these and split it, and then delete these two little bits, and then drag this in and see how they match up. And then take away checkpoints as well. That's the whole point of it. And then we can try drag these guys in here. And points as well. There we go. So clean this up. Let's see how that works. Photos. Let's see that. It's going to be kind of hard, but what we can potentially, because Slovakia starts with an S, we can maybe slide the so that he starts with into the S of Slovakia and see how that goes. It might sound a bit fast, but so potentially because this has got kind of lower audio quality, it's a video call, it's not like a clean pristine podcast, we could maybe get away with that in the idea that the audience will see it as a little glitch in the recording, like a little speed up thing. So we have that as an option, and maybe we'll leave it like that. But again, once it comes to putting it in, you often find these little edits change. So it's maybe not worth going too exact with it and coming back once it comes to piecing it together. But we'll just keep going forward now and see what other bits we can grab out of it. And yeah, if anything stands out, just a shout. So we could try say we were always a European-oriented region and just make it more punchy and the same meaning, but we can maybe try to start with we. So if we take that away, just see how that starts. Yeah, so actually I can mention this since I've accidentally opened it. You can also open up a fade menu by a media menu in general by double-clicking on the file, the audio clip. And in here, you can see your fade information, so you can adjust the fades, but you have a lot. So don't be overwhelmed by looking at it, but you can overall set the volume of a specific clip from inside here. There's a huge amount of stuff. Most of it we probably won't go over because a lot of it gets very kind of intricate and not necessarily necessary for podcasting. But like, for example, you can change the name of it here. You can make it loop or not loop. You can mute it. So if you want to keep it there but have it not play back, you can just mute it. You can lock it in position. There's a whole range, just so if you open it, you don't go, oh, what is this menu? So we can take away those. Those, take that away, and drag this back. I can see. So you're always this. So we can potentially now, this is something that I'm still figuring out within myself the best way to do it, because sometimes if there's very minor grammar errors, I don't want to fix them because I think that's important is the way the person talks and as long as it's intelligible. But then when it comes to changing stuff around that still maintains the same error, like here, we could try and put a little up there, but I don't think it's worth it. I think it's better to have the more earnest, true representation of how it was presented.
But depends also through my experience of editing the interviews that when I was doing journalism. Sometimes you can delete a long A and etc. and they don't really recognize audially the interviewee. So sometimes when they are like tightly incorporated into the audio file, obviously it's a thing that is quite hard to fix. However, in the end of the day, it also might end up having a lot of the extra unnecessary audio material inside the podcast.
Yeah. So I think we'll take away the R, but we could do just oriented region. Okay. And then we can join these guys. So now, oh, that's a little bit fast. You can kind of hear, and the cadence doesn't quite match. So we'll just zoom it in and edge it along, maybe a little bit more. I think we can go a little bit more. So what you're going to see now when we drag this, these fades are going to go to this, which is like a fade out and fade in. And I don't really want that. So you just drag this out and you'll see it becomes a crossfade. It kind of merges the two together. Cool. And I think we can just cut a little bit of time off of that. And actually that works very nicely. So just delete these little sections and drag them back here. And now it's either going to be a case of bringing it a lot closer or a lot further, I think, for the cadence. I tend to play it a little bit before and kind of tap along to what I expect the cadence to be. That was almost there. I think maybe the slightest bit to the right. We can maybe take away that like as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then just 3 days. Potentially, I'm not sure English-wise.
What he means, it's a historical moment of like 3 days of independence as a country of Transcarpathian region, which it was a small border episode, and it's significant. It's not noticeable for the region. However, it's never end up with some successful consequences.
We might actually need that. I think there's no way without getting in, because the thing I often find with editing is virtually anything is possible, but sometimes you'll spend a lot of time because you'll have to go through and find the right word with the right intonation 20 minutes down the timeline. And in the end, you end up maybe shaving off a second, but actually you lose the personal impact because you've basically programmed someone's voice. So I try to be kind of practical about it. And then at the end, because this is only the first round of like going through and clearing, if later down the line they become an issue, then I can look at that. But rather than doing that all up front and spending hundreds of hours doing edits, it's better to just get the rough skeleton there. Okay, so I like that little thing as a chunk here. So if I drag this down in general, and then I think from this one, this starts as another little block. So we drag down, let's just check. I think it was this as well. Yeah, there we go. So drag down these two little bits, and now I think we work from here. So I'm going to do again the color coordination thing that we did before, just because, especially with podcasts and stuff, the most important thing I find is organization. If you start having hundreds of different files everywhere and no system, it gets very messy very, very fast. So I'm just going to take, one sec, I'm going to escape, zoom over here and zoom out, and you can just steal the color from one of these ones. So right click, take some colors. I must say, I'm not the biggest fan of Reaper's color coding system, but it is just the way it is.
It's okay.
So there we go. Now, if we just resume on and we'll just continue cutting, and yeah, any input, of what you guys think. Just saying we can make it happen.
So
yeah.
No, I just think that you can straight ahead delete the first. It was a big impact because then he's actually counting the impact from different sides. So he's all self-repeating himself, but in more details. So the first part could be erased because he's going, counting or.
Yeah. So we could just cut, I think, potentially. Let's see. So we start. Yeah. Okay, so I quite like this bit where he kind of sums up.
That's the cut.
Yeah, here's the cut. And maybe I'd like the word city. Does he say city further along? Oh, that's city.
Mm-hmm.
He whispers it a bit. Yeah, you develop a very intimate relationship with how people speak. When you do a podcast with them, you learn exactly how loudly they say certain words and stuff.
They're all very different.
Yeah. So was it this cut?
But also in the future episodes of the workshop, we're going to cover some basic magic touch to the audio files as well, like de-esser and other things to make it more audible and more format friendly as well for some platforms. It depends where you're obviously planning to play your podcast as well. So, but we're going to try to also explain a little bit about the formats and the overall package of it, how it's supposed to be done.
Yeah, no, exactly. We'll get into all the kind of effects and stuff, but I figured for the first one, just get super comfortable with like the basic features, getting around, and then we can start looking at effects and stuff. Almost there. It's very, very close. Just a bit of tweaking. Maybe a little bit of a long pause. Just it's kind of almost the intonation he does before when he goes and then city. And then because we need to kind of trim that. So that works for now. Again, when it comes to putting it in situ, we might have to look at that. But equally, this is something I was going to talk about a bit later on, but maybe it's important now, that we'll also need to consider maybe at the end of this, the sorts of location sounds that we would like. For example, when he's talking about a multicultural city, especially if we know ahead, we really want the edit to be the way it is like this, but it is, it's a hard edit at the end. You can't just have it cut so abruptly. What we can do is go, okay, well, I want to then do a soundscape kind of design. I want to design this multicultural city, whether it's finding a YouTube video that I can kind of rip like a weird home video of actually Ushgorod before the war with that, or designing it from various sound and samples. And we can create a little scape, and we'll look at that in the next workshop. But it can really help those edit points if they're a bit dodgy. So don't stress too much if it doesn't work by itself. There's always the ability to go, okay, how can I add ambient tracks to make this work? So let me zoom back out and resume. So we go from here. So I'm from, I think. Take this away. Okay, so I think we can condense this down to just him kind of listing off the family members we don't need necessarily. So, and then we can maybe take away from an early age, because I feel like it's implied. That's a nice little section. So I think if we separate this and okay, so that's a nice little kind of like cultural background of himself. And we can use that again to draw parallels with some of the cultural stuff that happens in the blocks before. So they kind of have a little conversation with themselves. And let's just go through this next little bit. Because yeah, he went on for a while with this question. So maybe we can change the order he said these, because I really like the way he sums up with his dad being a Russian literature teacher, Hungarian or Slovakian, Hungarian Russian literature teacher. And I think we can just maybe put the mum in before it, because it doesn't end as nicely for a phrase kind of thing. Maybe actually, because they're all Hungarian, I think putting it anywhere apart from the end will kind of trundicate the feel, because it has a really nice flow with him going Hungarian speaking, Hungarian family, Hungarian granny, Hungarian father. So maybe we'll just need to pop it at the end.
His mom's still Hungarian speaking.
Yeah, that's a nice little section. So let's continue on from there. And I quite like this little bit. I mean,
with the laughing, it's a good.
Yeah,
it's showing
yeah.
them the character.
Inside their families, I think we can maybe, I don't know.
I can explain why he's laughing on saying a small person, because he's 2 meters height. So and it's just a fact. So this is why he's just as a small person. This is his reaction.
I know. No, I like it. I really like I think the most important when it comes to podcasts that have a lot of kind of like factual information to them is the personal element is the most important to make it engaging and entertaining. Because otherwise it just can end up like reading a textbook. So. We can maybe take that because away as well. Just saving seconds that are not relevant, don't add, is always good, especially when it's easy. You can see when there's big gaps between the audio, it's super easy to do edits and take stuff out. We just need to see what's actually happening here. I think there's a little double. So we can just do that and take this and just take that fact sheet all the way. Drag this here. So and put it here. Okay, yeah, so we'll check this again. Of the dots. So I think we can edit this early and say families. And if we can try and cut it before that, so I think it'll be nice. So you get really good at reading waveform after a while. So I think this is the so of so maybe. Yeah, so that's, I think if we delete that, just hear how it sounds. Yeah, so we need that second S actually, I think is the plural of families, but we'll see how easy it is to chuck in families and here, and we can drag these down again into the tape chosen folder and check the ending. We delete these. Yeah, that's kind of a fairly good edit. And wow, there's still a lot of this question left, but I mean, I guess we have been fairly. We need to also drag these down here and drag them. And do you guys have any ideas in terms of the interrelation? Are there any things that jump out to you as like glaringly obvious that this section really nicely interrelates to another previous bit we've cut, or none at the moment, just out of curiosity?
I would make assumption about this only after the first like editing, major editing of the overall the file, because then you get familiar with all the material and then it's kind of easier to work with those edits because they are on the surface instead of being like a big long file that is still waiting for an edit, I assume. So like through my editing experience, you reduce and then you reduce from reduced and then you reduce from reduced to reduced, right? So this is how you work, and your final composition gonna be based on the fourth layer of reduced material.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll play on that. This huge mix of culture. No. So we can maybe take this like out and put that makes the true. I just feel like it has much more impact. That makes so we can separate here and try to put these guys together. Yes, so maybe we can actually leave the bit before, though it has a lot of nice personalization because there's already so much from this, and we can just get from talking about it being a safe place and then becoming a refugee center. Because in terms of the narrative, I quite like that that it's that now we have a pivot point to switch to the work he's doing and how that relates to the broader spectrum of what's going on in Ukraine. We can just start from we, if we can get that edit point. There's a we here, I think. We and maybe here. So we now I think we'll just need to have the so. Okay, so I like this section as like a transitional section. And I don't know, what are your guys' opinions on the quantity of civilians? Because I think it's kind of quite useful to visualize the scale, but it is to an extent repeating the point ahead. So I would maybe put it in for my first production and then take it out or pick one of them by the end. But I think we can take out people and just have 900,000 and then oh, we can actually, I think we can maybe just have the population doubled or tripled. Cool. See if we can take that as just a. Yeah, perfect. So let's try put this in here. Okay. I think these are not necessary. Actually, I think without now listening to it in that sort of context, I would maybe make the choice to go back and re-add some of that, because to me at least, it sounds like it can have a negative connotation, but I know in the context he said it, it has a positive connotation about Ushgorod being so welcoming. So I think we should maybe actually go back and select a little section about it being welcoming.
It's a city of a sterling size, that now accommodates, a spare 500,000, constantly transiting through the region. So this is quite a big, well, maybe not 500,000, but now, but in the first weeks especially, enormous amount of people. And, yeah.
Wait, let's see if I can. Okay, so I think that "you are more than welcome" here is an important. So I'm going to take that, and sometimes I will just also, I don't necessarily make it as blocks, but just an important piece that I think needs to fit in somewhere. I'll leave it there and then eventually add it to a block. But let's just see if we can make a little sub block out of it. No, I think maybe we can find a way of incorporating this into maybe even tacking it onto the front of this block. So we could even have "you're more than welcome" here with population for the wall. Oh, no, you're hearing two tracks on top of each other. Let me just scale them back. So So I think everything before that is not directly relevant. I feel like he said it nicer in other parts, but I quite like this idea of the readiness, and I think it might relate potentially to some of the other interviews we have. So I'll just maybe take this bit. Yeah, and again, I think with the overall narrative arch of Victor, I really like this kind of hospitality element that everything he says is very welcoming, and he's trying to describe this kind of open, warm environment for people to come to. So I think anything within his interview where he has kind of that sort of language, like he's saying here, no, like hosting and the terms he uses, it's really nice. So anytime I see that, I think it's just maybe a natural response. I'm trying to incorporate that in, because it also gives him a distinct personality, because lots of the interviewees are going to have similar topics. I mean, they're all different, but again, it's all volunteering specific to Ukraine, etc. I think we need to, or I need to consider how I can portray each personality type in a way that also helps personify the type of work they're doing to an extent. Like, for example, Victor is a tour guide, using the bits where he has very hospitable language, stuff that's welcoming, stuff that relates to that, I think helps more in a subconscious way than an overt way. But especially with podcasting and audio-based narrative, I think a lot of it becomes subvert, because you don't have a lot to work with in the overt outside of the exact message you got from the interview. And especially this type of interviewing we're doing, because it's not a format podcast of two people in a room having a conversation. It's much more a bit more avant-garde than that, and a bit harder to work with, because you have to like lay questions into each other without having your voice appear necessarily.
And Kerry, if you want, we can, because you were asking a lot of the conceptual questions regarding the project, and maybe we can open for you like a text file where we have a notes that our own breakthrough of our interviewees and what we were doing as a journalist or as a interviewers with those people to build this project up, and maybe then it's gonna bring a little bit more clarity. And save some time as well, and etc. to show what the final product in our imagination could and should look like, and what was our pre-production side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're reading my mind, Eugene. So I do have some rather large questions that I'd like to pose in this first segment. And I'm just going to blurt them out now. And it all goes back to how we're going from the minutia to the overall thing, because that's how we're working.
Yeah.
They're big questions.
That's okay.
What is this for exactly?
Okay.
What do you aim to achieve? Who is your targeted audience? How did you come to decide on these particular questions?
Yeah, so the initial impetus for doing it was the workshops themselves, but to actually develop them separate to that, I kind of took like a standard podcast role, and the goal here is for Western, because it's English speaking, it's for Western-based people to be able to interact a bit more intimately with people actually helping with Ukraine. So me personally, I've been quite informed watching a lot of stuff based on Ukraine, and my girlfriend's a journalist, but the Western media has a very specific portrayal of it. And from speaking with Eugene and other people I know that it's not distinctly as clear how people are actually helping. You tend to see a lot of footage of, for example, people at food banks physically carrying trays of food, which there are plenty of people doing, and that's very important. But I think that it misses out a lot of the other more, not even obscure, but the other volunteering that's happening that's not as easy to shoot or not as easy to show. So that was the initial line of how can we actually represent this humanitarian effort also in a more digestible way. Because, for example, if someone wants to help in the West, the idea of flying to Ukraine and going help carry cargo boxes from one truck to another truck seems ridiculous and like something you won't do. But realizing that, oh, I can actually just help a friend find a flat in another city because they're now a refugee, showing these forms of volunteering or helping organize on a much more minute scale. It's kind of this whole idea of a single drop in the ocean forms the ocean. So that's the
question. And the questions that we were asking our interviewees, they targeting not only to tell their background and not only to tell the story of what they're doing right now, and obviously we want to spread awareness and use the information as a tool, as a weapon, and as armor when it's possible to, because information is a weapon and an armor in the same time, in my opinion. But also the potential availability to the English-speaking auditory, or of the content which is very honest in a proper way, uncensored, in ways that when me and Sam playing the role of more like archival journalist in that case, and not really directing. So we're not trying to push more than the overall idea of the podcast, which is collecting those stories, showing how the small inputs can create a big picture in a long-term scale. Yeah, and but also showing that you can be located wherever you are located and participate in, well, in this particular, into helping either to refugees or helping informationally or helping physically, financially, and etc. All of those people have some answers that we hope going to be heard by some people who are looking for an opportunity to help in one or another way, but they don't really, maybe they're not sure about the charity organizations that they should donate. They're not sure if their money going to be spent on this, on the purpose that they promoted, or maybe they can help only with that little of their time that they can spend on this topic, but they still have an intention. Our interviewees showed telling their stories and showing how the Ukrainians or the supporters of Ukraine, other foreigners inside or outside Ukraine, united for that cause. And they also give some suggestions for in a different range about how you can participate with a very, very small input. And from Sam's side, for example, making this workshop and a podcast available, targeting this topic, but also having an educational attitude to also is kind of putting our job into the situation as well. I assume the audience, we have quite a big audience range. It's around 1540 and plus, to be honest. There is no significant, I would say, age range, because our podcast system, and you're going to see it through the workshops, is flexible enough to be multi-applicable to your creative directions, whatever you choose. However, showcasing the main practical side of it, which you already get familiar to, associating this with the video editing, and just choosing the topic and kind of exposing the topics through the editing. This is the main target, and to show that this is as available as just record an audio or take a photo of someone. And the podcasting is not that complex. It is a complex and work in a way. However, it can be done with much less requirements, which was less equipment, etc., or than it's expected, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of the final product, the goal, I believe we have an agreement already in place with Radio Bonavida, which is a community radio station here in Glasgow, and potentially also Clyde Build, which is another one. They're both kind of the two most established. That the podcast produced as a result of this workshop will be able to broadcast on there. So I guess the most directly applicable target market is the scene in Glasgow that listens to those radios. It's quite hard for me to describe it necessarily in words, but I kind of know it fairly well because it's a lot of the scene I work in terms of music. It's kind of people very interested in arts, but equally not necessarily incredibly educated or not able to find the right resources to educate themselves on Ukraine. And this is kind of a way of putting it into something in a natural way that might just resonate a bit more easily. But yeah,
not everyone not everyone can associate himself with a soldier, or not everyone can associate himself with another person who play extreme roles. But however, we are all different people, and we all have a different levels of exception, etc. But there is a big field of the people who still want to be engaged, and the heroes of our podcast is a little bit milder than something that we see daily on YouTube and on the TV as well, but they're still active participants of the war, even though they are not military participants, but they're still participants, and their stories can be associated, and we think can find reflection into those one who gonna hear it.
Does that answer that little segment of questions? I don't know if I missed anything.
Yes, it does.
Perfect. And if you want quickly before we wrap up, I can give you a quick rundown. I'll open up, I use Notion. Wait, let me see, I have to drag it across desktop. And you can just have a quick little look at the interviewees. So it's kind of my own notes, so it might be a bit chaotic and messy, but you'll just see the rough range of people. So I think in total it is five people. Yeah, five people. Yeah. And I'll just drag it here. So you should be able to see that now. There's a thing that says interviewees.
Yeah,
so yeah, you can see here we have Victor, who we've gone through today. There's a little kind of summary of what he does, the questions. So he's a tour guide, and his whole thing is the hospitality, making people feel comfortable. Then we have Victoria, who's a double refugee. So she's from Donetsk, refugee in 2014 to various places in like Odessa, Kiev, Lviv, and then at the start of this war, she's now a second refugee. And at the moment, we did her interview from Spain. So she's kind of more to do with the diaspora and like the impact it had on these people that we see following the journey. So we see how Victor is helping people leave Ukraine by kind of helping with the refugee city, so to say, like the city at the hub of it. Then we have Victoria, who's the actual person that would be on this theoretical journey, kind of representing that voice.
Her street doesn't exist anymore. Her city doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's completely leveled.
It's not habitual anymore.
And then we have Lisa, Lisa's from Lviv, and she organized a refugee transport through the kind of serendipitous crossing of the border with someone that they just helped. Ended up creating this multinational crossing for refugees from Uzhhorod, which is where Victor is, to Austria, Germany, Hungary, Poland, all of the kind of countries within Central and Eastern Europe. And so she kind of ties in again to this journey. So we have Vika, who's the person actually on the journey, Victor, who's helping from inside Ukraine at the physical place, Lisa, who's helping organize people to leave on that journey. Then we have Kasia, who actually we're interviewing today. And this one is going to be the one where we show you how to use a bit more professional equipment. We're going to use real mics and stuff and show you how to function with those. So she lives in Glasgow and she organizes the pro-Ukraine protests in Glasgow. And we're going to do that in person and talk to her. So she gives kind of the international perspective. And then we have Daniel or Danik, who's been working as a huge, like doing every form of volunteering, working as a fixer, being on the front lines to help translate with journalists. So he really gives a more broad scale of volunteering in the full coverage sense.
As a person who also been in some quite in the places of horrible crimes like Bucha, Irpin, or Odessa, and other places. So still as a fixer, this person as a volunteer seen a lot.
Yeah, so we hope to kind of paint a very, I guess in a way it's the full picture, but it'll be a very restricted full picture because it's a small amount of interviews and stuff. But essentially trying to show how all these differing narratives centralize to a certain similar goal. But yeah, so those are the interviews we'll be going through. Those are the different people and figuring out how to interrelate them, etc., etc. And yeah, I don't have an exact concrete image. I've kind of left it. I've done the pre-production from a journalism aspect, and the rest is we're going to kind of work through together so you can see the full creative aspect rather than shroud it in mystery by doing it behind the scenes and just say, voila, here's something I picked out. But yeah, I think that's kind of everything for today. Do you have any questions or any more, anything you want to say at all?
No, it's really great. I'm so excited. I wish you'd had a greater turnout, as I'm sure you do too.
Oh, it's totally fine. Luckily, they're being recorded, so hopefully some more people can tune in. And again, it's totally drop-in based, so ideally everyone could come for all of them. That'd be great. But there's no requirement to be here from day one and go to day 8 if you can only make 1 or 2. You know. But yeah,
and every
ideally.
session going to be available in a recording as well. Up to 5-7 days after the actual after stream, etc. So you will be capable to come back to it and so on. But regarding the brief information about our interviewees, we will find a way, and either we're gonna publish it with today's recording, or we're gonna email to you. We're gonna find a way and contact you regarding this, so you can have it somewhere as a file in front of you, so if you want to.
Okay, and I can reach both of you through the email, which gave me the Zoom link regarding homework and that kind of thing.
You can, but what will be faster and better is, let me just, in the chat, I'll put my email and you can email me, because otherwise they'll have to forward it on and it might get delayed. So let me just go to the chat real quick. So this is my work email. So I'm going to use, wait, I was going to make sure it's spelled user at Gmail. Yeah. So that's, oh wait, sorry, that went straight to Eugene. 1 sec. I need to send that to everyone. There we go. So that's my email there. Feel free to drop me an email. I'm friendly, I don't mind. And yeah, perfect. So the next session will be next week at the same time, at Tuesday, 11 till 1:30. And yeah, feel free to, if there's anyone that you know that would benefit from it, feel free to bring them along. They're welcome. There's no requirements. It's Ukrainian focused based on the subject matter and priority, but it's totally open to anyone who has a vague interest or wants to learn. Because it'll equally, I think, just engaging with the workshop also educates you a bit on Ukraine. I know I've learned more just by researching it, etc. So yeah, perfect.
So I am free to blab about this on socials.
Of course, yes, absolutely. You can reach whoever you want, however you want. It's all
Yeah,
perfect.
if you think there is someone who could be interested in this, please share the link and etc. We try to use all of our possible connections to spread it out and etc. Obviously, Tuesday morning is quite a time that someone can be at work or whatsoever. But if you're able to help us with spreading and get someone involved, we're more than happy to accommodate as much people as we able to.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And,
No problem. And we'll see you next Tuesday then.
yeah.
See you next Tuesday. Have a good week.
You
Same.
too. Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Perfect. You there?
So,
Hello. Yes.
recording.
Okay. Yeah, yes.